Now we'll move to the next presentation that will be presented by our next speaker, Dr. Hana Abdulkarim. Dr. Hana Abdulkarim is the director of the Drug Policy and Economic Center at National Guard Health Affairs in Riyadh. Dr. Hana Abdulkarim will talk about the performance-based agreement for innovative treatment. Please join me to welcome Dr. Hana Abdulkarim.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Dr. Najwa and the organizing team for the kind invitation, and thanks to Dr. Majid for the nice introduction. So I will be talking about managed entry agreements in general, focusing more on experiences and challenges. I have four main objectives for this presentation. First, to present a clear view of the unique access and reimbursement challenges for innovative medications, and to highlight the need for new mechanisms to reimburse innovations. Also, I will briefly discuss the different types of payment models, and finally explore the potential barriers to the use of new payment models. The good thing is that most of the topics were covered during the last lectures, so I will try to focus more on the issues that were not mentioned. Starting with a few slides about the increasing number of approved drugs around the world. This graph, for example, shows the number of FDA-approved drugs from 1993 to 2019, and if we focus on the last 10 years, you can see the number of new molecular entities approved by FDA almost doubled. Also, the number of approvals for biological drugs also increased significantly. This bar graph shows the number of orphan drug designations in the US and Europe from 2007 to 2017, and as you can see, for example, in the US, the number of orphan drugs approved jumped from around 130 to around 450 in 2017. Similar trend in Europe from jump from 100 in 2007 to up to 180 in 2017, and this reflects on greater spending on rare diseases, which raises a dilemma for payers. This graph shows the number of drugs that are not yet approved. All of these are under in the pipeline. More than 7,000 drugs are now in development. And as you can see, this flourishing pipeline will definitely play a role in addressing the challenges, clinical challenges faced by patients and healthcare system, but also it will have a significant burden on budgets. So new medicines definitely comes with hope for patients, promise of differential value, but they also come with price premium and significant uncertainty. And healthcare payers around the world face growing challenges in providing timely access to those innovative medications. We saw the flourishing pipeline of biologics, orphan drugs, and other high-priced medications that have the potential to have a significant impact on healthcare budgets. And increasingly, regulators are seeking to expedite the marketing authorization of most of the most innovative medications, and also physicians and patients are eager to use these products. Payers likewise want to ensure that effective new drugs are readily available for the patients, but they're also conscious of several difficulties, including the affordability of these treatments and the uncertainty at launch regarding the true value of new therapies that have most of the times immature evidence base. There is also concern about the appropriate use of new therapies, for example, whether there is a need for duration limits, doses limits, and so. Also, for their part, drug manufacturers are keen to secure market access for their new products as soon as possible. So we see here that we need to have improved access to those medications and to find a way in I would say share the risk of uncertainty around the data. We have different types of uncertainty, long-term safety uncertainty. We have the risk of long-term outcome uncertainty, and the uncertainty around the effect on individual patients, and uncertainty around the impact of changes in behavior of patients, and the impact of adherence on the performance of the drug, and finally the financial impact. So all of these reasons make innovations risky for everyone. For example, payers who bears the risk of making a bad deal or buy when incremental health benefits are not worth the additional cost. Also, manufacturers who operate with a huge R&D budget have a high risk. There is also the risk for patient and providers regarding the, as we said, long-term safety and clinical efficacy and all health outcomes. So now we will be talking about the access challenges that make or can delay the access to innovative treatments, and Dr. Bender touched upon some of these. For example, the first and most important is the R&D challenge. Developing a drug is extremely challenging for any type of disease. However, rare diseases in particular pose a particular challenge for R&D. Mainly due to the small number of patients in general. It's so difficult to recruit patients in trials. There are usually difficulties in diagnosing patients, so which will make it difficult also to find the eligible participant in clinical trials. There is also high heterogeneity among patients, usually limited epidemiological data on the natural history of many diseases, so which makes all stages of R&D more challenging and lengthy. Also, there is sometimes difficulty in identifying a well-defined outcomes or endpoints to measure the performance. So, as we said, clinical trials are very lengthy. They pose many challenges. It may take up to 6 years for a drug for common condition to be approved, to have a clear conclusion of clinical trials or to complete phase 3 clinical trials. However, for rare diseases, it may take up to 10 years. Another challenge is the high production cost for some of these drugs. And here we have an example of a Gaucher disease, a life-limiting, life-threatening disease that can impact several organs, and there was no available treatment for this disease until 1991, when Genzyme manufactured Celidase, an enzyme replacement therapy that is extracted from human placental tissue. And the company has priced this drug at an average of $382,000 per patient per year. Which was a shocking number, especially at that time. And the reason behind this high price was the fact that if you want to make or produce one vial of Celidase, you will need to harvest the active ingredient from 1,000 human placenta, which of course translates into high production costs. Another challenge is the process of market authorization, which is usually lengthy, especially for, if we say, new innovations that target diseases with rare diseases and diseases that have I would say unmet need or no previous treatment. It's so difficult for regulators to evaluate these medications. Another challenge is the reimbursement, mainly due to the lack of supporting policies and funding. And even if you find that the overall value of the product is great, sometimes it's so difficult to um, um, make them available due to affordability and budget limitations. For example, this nice analysis from Europe shows or tried to measure the average length of time between market authorization approval and patient access, and try to compare it between two periods of time between 2007 2009, and then compared it to 2014 2016, and they found that the average length of time between MA and patient access increased from 233 days in the period between 2007 2009 to 318 days in 2014-2016 period. So as you can see, even in Europe, pharmaceutical products are also struggling to reach patients after market authorization. So if you want to evaluate or assess these products, you need to look at the overall value, not only the acquisition costs compared to previous treatment. You need to look at different impacts that can new innovations have on healthcare system, because the impact of these high-cost drugs on health expenditure can have conflicting effects on different types. For example, on one hand, higher expenditure on these drugs may have cost offsetting effect in other areas. This may happen if they substitute, for example, another costly intervention, say avoiding surgery, avoiding hospitalization, or, for example, organ transplant. On the other hand, under a very or tight budget situation, this increase in expenditure on specific intervention may push away expenditure on other areas of care. For example, displacing other pharmaceutical or non-pharmaceutical product or increasing the budget overall. So if you want to evaluate the value of a product, you need to consider both cost offset effect and care diversion effect, and that's what we call value-based healthcare. So value-based healthcare enable governments, healthcare providers, and payers to improve the overall efficiency of the system by considering all the healthcare costs, reducing the administrative cost, and reducing also wastage. It can also help in supporting pay for value concept, and it can help also in making stakeholders work together to find policies and solutions that can improve access to innovative medications. Value-based system can also help industry in continuing developing innovative treatments, improving medication adherence and compliance, and maintaining their efforts to support broader patient access. So these are the different types of managed entry agreements. As you know, it is highly unlikely that a single payment model will be optimal for all situations. I will not go through all these types because Dr. Bander covered most of them, but as he mentioned, we have the financial based ones on the left, and these are the most commonly used ones, and we have the outcome based one, and there is a recent trend toward the use of outcome-based agreements. So financial-based one, for example, we have costs cap at either patient level or population level. We have cost sharing, we have a price volume agreement. Outcome-based agreements can involve risk-sharing agreement, bundled service agreements, pay for performance agreements, adherence-based ones, and evidence-based ones. So these all these types of different types of innovative payment models can help in reducing the overall certainty. For example, for payers, to reduce the uncertainty regarding the overall clinical value of the product and, of course, the financial impact. For industry, it can help them in demonstrating the value of their products, and it can help patients in gaining earlier access to their products. It can help the overall systems and healthcare providers in moving toward value-based systems. So let's take a look at the international experience for managed entry agreements in general. By far, Italy is the most active practitioner of managed entry agreements in Europe and the whole world as well. The country's managed entry agreements is supported by an extensive national system of online registries that helped in developing these agreements and saving the Italian healthcare system more than 530 million euros in 2017 alone. In England, in UK, NHS focused on negotiating simple discounts. However, there is a recent trend toward exploring a wider range of managed entry agreements, including price volume agreements, conditional reimbursement, deferred payments, and other types of agreements. Sorry. Spain is considered relatively latecomer to managed entry agreements. Most of or majority of the deals are risk-sharing agreements, also some expenditure cap agreements. The French healthcare system uses a price volume agreements, reduction to list price as well, limits to daily cost of therapy or limits to dosing or number of units prescribed for a given medication. In 2017, managed entry agreements saved the French healthcare system around 1.3 billion euro, and this makes an increase of around 200 in just 5 years. In Canada and the US are still not very active in the field of managed entry agreement. However, the region witnessed an increase in awareness of the use of financial-based risk-sharing agreement in particular. I believe due to the changing environment, maybe Canada and the US will see more risk-sharing agreements in the future. In our country, there is a continued and even growing interest in from both manufacturers and payers. However, the number of executed agreements is still small, mostly in exceptional situations only. We will talk about some of these examples. There is a lot of talk, especially at the level of MOH. However, with improved data systems and the recent registries, it is expected that we will have more agreements implemented in the near future.
Dr. Hana, you have 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So this is an example of some of the agreements conducted by Saudi MOH. For example, in the area of multiple sclerosis, because we have a high number of MS patients in the kingdom, most of the recent innovations are costly, and there is uncertainty in the outcomes related to the disease. There is also long waiting time or delay to access of treatment. So MOH and the industry agreed on managed entry agreement involving providing free treatment initiation for a specific number of patients with continuous assessment and monitoring of clinical outcomes. Another agreement for spinal muscular atrophy, a disease area that had significant unmet need, and the available treatment was very expensive. There is also uncertainty of outcomes. So the agreement involved selective reimbursement based on the a clinical outcome. A similar agreement with familial hypercholesterolemia for the group of PCSK9 inhibitor drugs, very high costly medications. There is uncertainty of outcomes. And the agreement involved providing free treatment initiation for a specific number of patients, and a price volume agreement for 3 years with continuous monitoring of clinical outcomes. So just a summary of all the challenges to innovative payment models. The most important one is the significant additional effort and resource use required to execute managed entry agreements compared to traditional or direct discounts. You need to make sure that the rebates coming from the industry can offset the cost of establishing the agreement itself. Another challenge is the performance metric selection. With the challenge of identifying or agreeing on a meaningful outcome. We have the challenge of inadequacy of data infrastructure and the fragmented system that we have here in the kingdom. There is also difficulty in reaching an agreement because, as I said, we have a fragmented system. So the company had to negotiate the agreement with different parties, and it's so difficult to agree on the selected outcomes, the criteria of the patients, and the methods of data collection. Also, another challenge is a risk of potential disinvestment in certain disease areas. For example, maybe companies will be discouraged to invest in our market because they want to avoid the agreements. Another challenge is that some companies may come with higher price because they know that you will ask for managed entry agreement, so which will mean that eventually the managed entry agreement will not give you a better or more fair price. The last one is based on practical experience. It is so difficult to delist a drug from reimbursement once you establish the agreement and you decided to reimburse it for a certain number of patients. Even if you find with data collection that the outcome is not reached by most of the patients in your setting, it's so difficult to decide to delist the drug after the initial approval. This is my last slide. Thank you very much for listening.